WION sources also indicating that Sheikh Hasina has landed in Agartala in India. So those are some of sources confirming that information. But big breaking news at the moment is, if you're just tuning in, that the Prime Minister of Bangladesh, Sheikh Hasina, has stepped down and has resigned from her post. She has left the country for a safer place, which is India. At the moment, legal and constitutional challenges ahead for Bangladesh to form a government. In the next couple of days, the army is likely to step in. The security situation has been out of control over the last couple of days. There have been mass protests. We also believe that there has been looting, arson, and several people have entered the residential palace of the Bangladeshi Prime Minister earlier today. Siddhant Sibal, our diplomatic correspondent, is joining us once again on the phone line. And Siddhant, if you can just confirm some of that information that's been trickling in about Sheikh Hasina landing in India.
Well, yes, now multiple sources are confirming that she has landed in India. Where specifically, we do not know essentially right now, but it looks like India was her natural destination. But all in all, we know what has happened in the last 1 hour. The situation rapidly deteriorated. Protests have been seen across the country. Also, there is obviously official confirmation that Sheikh Hasina has left the country and she is heading towards India. Now, of course, there is expected to be fallout. Who fills the vacuum? We know that there will be an address by the army chief as well. What will be the announcement is closely watched. Also, the situation of the Indians as well. Just yesterday, India had updated its travel advisory for Indians in Bangladesh. And roughly since the crisis began 2 or 3 weeks ago, we saw how almost 8,500 Indian students had left the country. So a precarious situation, a dangerous situation as well, a worry for India. And remember, since 2001, Bangladesh is the 4th country which has faced crisis in India's neighborhood, after Myanmar, Afghanistan, Sri Lanka, and now Bangladesh. So a lot of worry for India as the region heads towards more instability. In fact, Bangladesh was one of the most stable countries in the region with a good economic growth and infrastructure development. It was seen as the growth engine of the region, and now it looks like it's headed towards a region or a time of instability.
Absolutely, Siddhant. Sheikh Hasina herself has been a celebrated leader of South Asia, someone who's been seen as a strong woman leader as well. She's been in power for several years and has brought stability, many believe, to Bangladeshi politics. But it seems everything is up in the air at the moment. And how this all of this started? Well, the protests, which began late last month, escalated dramatically when students and student activists at the Dhaka University, the largest in the country, clashed violently with police and pro-government counter-protesters. And the roots of these protests, in fact, lay in a controversial quota system which reserves up to 30% of government jobs for family members of veterans from Bangladesh's 1971 War of Independence against Pakistan. And all of that, of course, has snowballed over the last couple of weeks into mass protests. Protesters argued that the system was discriminatory and favoured supporters of Prime Minister Hasina's Awami League party. They advocated that it needed to be merit-based and had to replace the existing quota system. These visuals on your screens of that chopper earlier leaving, I presume, Bangladesh for a safer zone, which is somewhere in India. WION sources also confirming that, in fact, she has landed in India. There is some confusion on where, in fact, she has landed. But as Siddhant was pointing out earlier, instability once again in India's neighborhood. Sheikh Hasina has been in power in Bangladesh. Now, of course, legal and constitutional challenges await the next government, which will have to quell these protests and also come up with a decisive action plan to make sure that these protests don't, in fact, pose a security challenge to Bangladesh as well. And the army has had to step in. They're likely to also hold a press conference. These are visuals coming in from Bangladesh there of several people on the streets of Bangladesh. And Siddhant, we are getting, in fact, live visuals from Bangladesh at the moment. And of course, as we've been pointing out, and our guests have also, that it will be a challenge now going forward for the next government formation, and also the kind of decisions they take to quell the protests on the ground.
Yes, essentially, we know that since the election results were announced, we saw that there was considerable developments in terms of the opposition also taking pot shots at the Prime Minister. And also, that Sheikh Hasina was the Prime Minister of the country since 2009. Now, that is a pretty long time now, consecutively, if we talk about more than 15 years. Essentially, we know that situation for her anti-incumbency was playing. But her tenure will be remembered for shows, of course,
Right, we're just going to dial Siddhant Sibal back on the phone line. That connection seems to be weak, but as he was pointing out that Prime Minister Hasina has ruled, in fact, Bangladesh since 2009 and secured a fourth consecutive term this January through elections boycotted by the main opposition, the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, and has faced accusations of entrenching power through state institutions and suppressing dissent as well. And the recent violence has in fact highlighted the growing dissatisfaction and demands for change among the Bangladeshi population. These visuals on your screens of that chopper from Bangladesh leaving for India. Sheikh Hasina and her sister in fact have fled to a safer zone. That safer zone has been indicated to be India. And the protesting students had announced a March to Dhaka program today. Houses of public representatives, 20 Awami League offices, police stations and other government installations were in fact attacked, vandalized and torched in 39 districts. Remember, over 90 people have been killed in these protests. Clashes between protesters and leaders of the Awami League and its associate organizations were reported in several districts as well. And residents and offices of ruling party ministers, state ministers and leaders from Awami League were vandalized in 14 districts. The security situation seemed to be extremely tenuous this morning as well, which has in fact forced Sheikh Hasina to quit and to flee the nation as well. Siddhant Sibal is back on the phone line with us. And Siddhant, as you were pointing out, you've been someone who's tracked the Bangladeshi Prime Minister as well, and her rise as recently as January. She was, of course, re-elected as Prime Minister. Take us through some of her highlights.
Well, just this year, she has been to India twice. First at the oath-taking ceremony of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and then, of course, again, she traveled for a bilateral visit. In fact, her visit to Delhi was the first bilateral visit of any foreign head of government since Prime Minister Narendra Modi's third term. But all in all, talking about the key highlights, now, under her tenure, she has a pretty long tenure. She became the Prime Minister in 2009. That's almost more than a decade. So essentially, she has seen a global dynamics changing very well in terms of the highs and the lows, and how under her tenure, Bangladesh was able to achieve a strong economic growth, stability in the region as well, and of course, her strong stance against dealing with terrorism. That is something that she was very vocal about under her tenure. In fact, the Indian side and the Bangladeshi side used to say the Sonar era, or the golden age of India-Bangladesh relationship, is underway. Now, what happens next is the big question. Now, it's just not India that will be closely watching, but also countries afar like Japan, who has heavily invested in Bangladesh, especially when it comes to the Matabari port. That is a key connectivity project in the region, the Japanese connectivity project. Now, when it comes to the international dynamics, that, of course, we know what's going to happen. Countries are closely watching. There have been advisories as well. But domestically is the big question. The vacuum she has left. Who next after her? Will the country be under army control, and how long the country will be under army control? There is, of course, worry over the Jamaat and, of course, the Bangladesh National Party as well. These parties, of course, have been taking a strongly anti-India stance in the past as well. In fact, taking a lead when it comes to the India out movement. So that is something that has been a concern for India. So there are a lot of dynamics, but situation remains pretty fluid, dynamic, worrisome for New Delhi, even as more and more of India's neighbors fall into some kind of crisis situation. We still remember those visuals of Sri Lanka where the residence of Rajapaksa was stormed Now, of course, visuals are coming as to how the Prime Minister's residence is stormed. We also saw the visuals of the fall of Kabul in 2001, the Myanmar coup, and now, of course, Bangladesh. So India, of course, will be worried as the situation becomes precarious in its neighborhood.
Right. And Siddhant, as you were pointing out, and our guest, the former diplomat Shamsher Chaudhary, also pointed out earlier today that the army will be talking to several political leaders and parties about government formation, but so far they seem to be leaving the Awami League out of those discussions. And as early as January, of course, there were Out with India campaigns being held in Bangladesh, in Dhaka, by the opposition leaders who called Sheikh Hasina pro-India. So obviously there will be international ramifications of who comes in next, but also domestically, of course, a very, very trying time for Bangladesh. There will be questions about government formation, about key decision making, when the new government is formed, whether it will be a coalition government, and which party and which leader. All of those questions, of course, remain. But at the moment, what we know is that Sheikh Hasina has resigned. She has been in power since 2009. She has a long legacy of leadership, and she has left for India. In fact, she has landed in India. The army press conference, which was likely to take place anytime now, has been shifted, delayed. Possibly several decisions are being made. Backdoor conversations are taking place at this moment. The security apparatus had been shaken up in the last month or so with the relentless protests. Over 98 people have died in the last couple of days. These protests, of course, against the government's quota system. In response to that unrest, the government had declared an indefinite nationwide curfew starting at 6 p.m. on Sunday, the first such step during the current wave of protests. A 3-day general holiday was also announced starting Monday. Additionally, the government had shut down internet services as well. But none of those decisions by the government had stopped the protests on the ground, it seems, which had turned violent. Many people tried to even enter the premises of the Bangladeshi Prime Minister earlier today as well. There's been large-scale looting and vandalism reported from Bangladesh. This is, of course, a tricky situation for the country, in India's neighborhood. Demonstrators also blocked major highways and launched a non-cooperation program, escalating the violence nationwide. Police stations and ruling party offices became targets with reports of severe clashes and significant casualties as well. For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.